Here we go. So I've hit the record button. Gabby, do you want to say hello?
Hi, everyone. So before we start, I just want to say that I'm really happy to uh, work with the Hope because we decided to join forces between FIU COIL and SUNY COIL Center so we can expand our network through this webinar series. So I'm just happy to see familiar faces here from Seneca, from Sheffield, and other partner universities. I'm happy to see old friends again, Leslie, and who else? Well, I see some new faces too. So this will be a really nice way to keep connecting. Thank you, Hope.
Yay. And we have our speaker here, and we will introduce her shortly. But first, we're just gonna go over briefly. All of you guys are very much part of the the COIL universe, but maybe there are some of you who like to hear the COIL story, as we all know. So as you all know, this is an opportunity for people to think more deeply about what we do in virtual exchange, COIL, collaborative online international learning, and our tried and true model of that it's one course with a module in that course. It's not the whole course, connecting with another course, and it's not the whole course with another professor. And you guys can decide the language of your collaboration, and then the students get to do what they get to do. And so Gabby, do you want to put those links in the chat? And I'll just keep going. And COIL network is in 147. Actually, we're now 153 in 28 countries. And there was I'll share let's see, we have a Padlet, which is fun. And FIU's in 25 countries and 147 COILs. Hello. Oh, and head counts. That's a nice thing to share. Great. All right. And just a reminder of how COIL connects to your campus initiatives. You never have to do this alone. This is really group. This is a team. There's no I in team, as we all know. And this is so true for COIL, that there is a way to connect to COIL to so many different initiatives on your campus. And also to really, we want to stop having these silos of what happens domestic diversity wise versus international. And we really want to have this inclusive workplace, which we all know, which is COIL. So this is our speaker's talk today, Critical Global Citizenship Education through Critical Virtual Exchange. And we just want to remind you, our next webinar is going to be on May 17th. It's always the third Wednesday of the month at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. And this one is going to be focusing on making data work for you, whether it's Andrea Martinez has a dashboard that they use at UDEM so they can see their COIL information at a glance. And I am so jealous. I can't wait to hear more about that. Tammy Roster is going to talk about institutional data and connecting that to the registrar and how she uses an attribute in Banner. And it might spark some ideas for how to be gathering this data that we all need to gather. Oopsie. And whoops, sorry. And then Gabby, do you want to say what Alonso and Lucas are going to talk about?
So Alonso and Lucas will share about our global footprint. So the previous image that you saw, the numbers of FIU, so they are in charge of gathering all the information and make it work not only for COIL, but for other international programs. So this is the part that they will be presenting on some of the COIL impact in the institution.
Awesome. Great. Okay. So save your calendar for that, and keep introducing yourself in the chat. And oh, I'm glad that that is a good topic for you. And so with that, and then we have in June, we're doing voice during Pride Month. Woo! Celebrating LGBTQ solidarity and support. And Gabby, do you want to mention what this is about?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we decided to reach out to those professors that have been implementing COIL and doing some project with the students regarding equality, both in the LGBTQ community, but also about women rights and other kind of topics that goes into this part. So we will have people from Tecnológico de Monterrey, but also from SUNY Oneonta and SUNY Poly.
Right. The Oneonta team is actually a co-curricular project with students who are working with LGBTQ centers in Latvia, Italy, and Poland, and sharing terminology and information with each other. So that should be really interesting. And then in August, do you want to talk about that, Gabby?
Sure. Also, here we will be presenting really interesting project done by professors in Mexico and in Spain, in Tarragona. And they have been pretty actively, as the title says, activating activism, that it was a title that Hope suggested, and is really good for this because they are working with the 17 SDGs and their students, but also they are motivating students to go into the real world and practice some of the knowledge that they are acquiring during the COIL experience. So they have been working, helping people in need, supplying some food or some medical stuff that the people in their communities need. So this is a really good project, and they would like to share about this.
Great. Wonderful. Okay. Oops. And now we will turn it over. Well, before we turn it over to Miriam, I would like to read her, at least the first paragraph of her bio. And here we go. But I do want to say, Miriam is one of, honestly, the originators of doing this kind of work. She has been doing it for so long. I feel humble in her presence. And we have all greatly benefited from her expertise and her vision and her understanding of how working together through technology has been a way for so many people to learn languages, to learn how to work together, to learn about collaboration. And so I'm so thrilled, after many requests for her to speak to this community, that we finally have her here. And so I will read her bio, and then I will turn it over to you, Miriam. And also, I have also personally had a wonderful relationship working with Miriam at the COIL Center. And since then, and so just so thrilled that she is here today. And as always, I learned so much from her, as you all will as well. So Dr. Miriam Hauck is the Associate Head for Internationalization, Equality, Diversity, and Inclusion in the School of Languages and Applied Linguistics at the Open University in the UK. She's also a Senior Fellow of UK's Higher Education Academy. She has written numerous articles and book chapters. Here, actually, I'll share my screen so that everybody can see what I'm reading. book chapters on the use of technology for the learning and teaching of languages and cultures in virtual exchange contexts in particular. Currently, her scholarly work focuses on theorizing and framing the nascent field of critical virtual exchange, which I'm really looking forward to hear this new word critical in there, which takes the fact that VE, so virtual exchange based internationalization at home, is not inherently equitable and inclusive as its point of departure, but prone to Western hegemonies and inequalities. Yes, we know this, and so we look to you for all the solutions. Thank you. Miriam presents regularly at conferences, seminars, workshops worldwide. She is the president of the European Association for Computer Assisted Language Learning, Eurocall, and chair of the Language and Culture Expert Community of the European Association for International Education. She serves as associate editor of Call Journal and is member of the editorial board of Recall and LLT. She is a founder member of Uni Collaboration and was a co-investigator in the EU-funded VAMOS, Evolve, and Erasmus Plus virtual exchange projects and several projects funded by the Stevens Initiative. She is also an incredible researcher that I'm sure all of you have referenced in one of your own articles or presentations. And so here is the source. And if you may all give her a warm round of applause and hands in the air and all those good things. And if we can all unmute for a second and say howdy. Let's say hello to Miriam.
Hey,
Howdy.
Howdy.
Hello.
Howdy.
Hello.
Nice, wonderful. And so over to you, Miriam.
Yeah, this is an amazing homecoming for me, virtual homecoming. I see so many familiar faces and names. And yeah, an incredible honor to be invited to give this talk. Those who know me and who know my work know that I am a little bit on a mission, and I have made a pledge to myself that for the last decade of my professional life, I do not want to do any work anymore that is not sociopolitically relevant, or to express it in a more positive way, I only want to do work that is sociopolitically relevant. And this brings me to critical virtual exchange. There is a direct link to critical global citizenship education, which was in the original title of my talk. You'll see how all of this is interwoven in a moment. But basically, I have almost kind of left virtual exchange as we know it behind us, and I have moved to the field of critical virtual exchange. Let me see. And some of you will be familiar with what I'm going to say and with what you're going to see, but there's always slightly an added new dimension to it, so I hope you will still find it interesting. This, by the way, is someone has sketched this during a presentation I gave at the Moving Target conference organized by the DAAD in Germany at the end of November and December, and shared it with me afterwards. And I was very, very touched because it encapsulates what I am pursuing: inclusive practices in and through virtual exchange. So here are my talking points. I will start with what we think we know about virtual exchange, and that will bring me very quickly to the challenges that are associated with inclusion and exclusion in virtual exchange. I will then zoom in on virtual exchange through the equality, diversity, and inclusion lens. This is where I'm also going to make the bridge to critical global citizenship education. I will present a new framework, actually an updated version already now of a new framework, the 2023 version of the 2022 framework. And I will, after all this cognitive lifting in the first half of my talk, it will become very applied. I will give 1 or 2 concrete examples, and I will finish off with saying a few words on what the implications are for research and practice if we continue on the critical virtual exchange path. Okay, so let me just rearrange my screen slightly. Yeah. So very quickly, what do we know about virtual exchange? One of the many definitions, this one by Robert O'Dowd on the screen. It does combine the deep impact of intercultural dialogue with the broad reach of digital technology. It originates in the learning and teaching of languages and cultures in the 1990s of last century, and it is hailed as an experiential learning opportunity. It is a strong catalyst in advancing the internationalization of higher education curricula. You know that is known as internationalization at home. It can prepare for, it can deepen, it can extend, it can emulate physical exchanges. Sometimes it can also bookend physical exchanges. And it is also known to prepare students for the globalized digital workplace. And we also know that it promotes transversal skills development, empathy, curiosity, conflict transformation, problem-solving, teamwork, and others. And we do know that these skills feature high on the agenda of businesses and organizations currently confronted with the global environment characterized by VUCA. It is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous for at least another decade as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. But virtual exchange is not innocent. Many practices are still electives that are available only to some students. Virtual exchange is not inherently equitable and inclusive. Just the opposite, it can reproduce or perpetuate existing exclusion or even create new digital inequalities, issues of access to technology, for example. It is prone to Western hegemonies insofar as the exchanges can be influenced by the teaching partner's academic positions, by their linguistic competence, the linguistic competence of their students. The hegemony of English in virtual exchange can be a challenge. As I just mentioned, access to experience in the use of technology can be a challenge. There are often institutional constraints, you know them all, lack of support, lack of acknowledgement, lack of rewards. There can be challenges related to gender, race, and age, and of course also geopolitical issues. And there is an ongoing underestimation of the political and social dimension of technology use, included the technologies we use for virtual exchange. There is often a lack of awareness of the power dynamics created by educational practices, including virtual exchange, that there can be a prioritization of certain knowledges and through that a reinforcement of social injustices and epistemic injustices. And this is why Robert O'Dowd and Jos Belen concluded that we need yet to find out more about how processes of inclusion and exclusion play out in virtual settings, including in virtual exchange. Now, Kastler and Lewis, these are 2 colleagues from the Stevens Initiative in 2021, have set a couple of parameters for virtual exchange through the equality, diversity, and inclusion lens. I'm sure you have come across those, but indulge me, let me just share them with you. They say institutions must seek equitable partnerships with partners from all demographics, including minority-serving institutions and institutions in countries where the main language of instruction is not English. I'm pretty sure that all of those who work at the Sunni community colleges can identify with this need, with this priority. That institutional leadership needs to prioritize the creation of resources, of training, and of support for exchange implementers, so the educators, you, us. And that we, the implementers, need to prioritize activities that specifically explore social justice topics as part of the exchanges, as part of the dialogue between the student participants. And that the exchanges need to serve all participating communities rather than the community of the leading partner, by finding common issues to tackle or by customizing exchange projects for local realities. And from what I've gathered, some of you are already involved in these kinds of COIL and virtual exchange practices. And finally, the technology choices, very often the lowest common denominator, in terms of bandwidth, is the best to ensure equitable access during the implementation of the exchanges. Now, I also see beyond virtual exchange to the equality, diversity, inclusion lens, I see, which is critical, the first step in the direction of critical virtual exchange for me. I also see critical virtual exchange as an instantiation of critical global citizenship education, the way Andreotti has framed it, with notions of power, voice, and difference at its core, and involving the systematic development of skills of critical engagement, reflexivity, and relearning, unlearning, relearning. Critical global citizenship education involves analysis and critique of the relationships between different perspectives, different languages, power dynamics, social groups, and social practices by the learners. This needs to become part of what our students do in the exchanges. Critical virtual exchange, in that sense, then sets out to address social justice and inclusion, both at institutional and individual level. For example, by improving student access to employment through purposeful VE experiences, those with an outreach element. And I say about a little bit more about this in a moment. Yeah, so virtual exchange, critical virtual exchange is virtual exchange through the equality, diversity, and inclusion lens, and with a focus on social justice. This is the framework I proposed back in 2022. 4 pillars to critical virtual exchange: the use of low bandwidth technologies, exchanges that specifically target student populations that are traditionally underrepresented in study abroad or internationalization at home, mostly students from low socioeconomic backgrounds, and the systematic alignment of virtual exchange project topics and virtual exchange project outcomes with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Again, from what I've heard, I understand that many of you are already doing this. And then comes the 4th pillar, the inclusion of local outreach activities, that is student contact with local businesses, with NGOs, with non-profit organizations, with charities, as part of the virtual exchange projects on either side of the exchange, and then bringing that knowledge, that work into the exchanges, conversations, artifact production with their learners in their intercultural or cross-cultural teams. But I would like now to propose a 5th pillar, actually, then that is the systematic integration of trans-languaging approaches as another defining element of critical virtual exchange. And specifically, but not only in exchanges where the learning and teaching of languages and cultures is the focus. So specifically in those exchanges, but actually really across the curriculum. So translanguaging, for those who are not familiar with the term, it's not code switching, it is translanguaging. It means the fluid use of multiple linguistic and semiotic meaning-making resources in a combined single repertoire, the student's semiotic budget. It's about practices that encourage all learners to use their full linguistic and semiotic budget, their repertoire, their abilities to make meaning and communicate online, to help them realize their full multimodal communication potential. And where else can you do this but in a technology-mediated environment? So if we then add this fifth element, we end up with a framework for critical virtual exchange that looks something like this. I also see critical virtual exchange informed by critical digital literacy. There is a clear interface, critical digital literacy, that examines how the operation of power within digital contexts shapes knowledge, shapes identities, shapes social relations, shapes our interactions in ways that privilege some and marginalize others. But it is at the same time, critical digital literacy leverages digital technologies for social justice-oriented action and change. For example, by providing access to a wider and a more diverse range of students in collaborative online learning projects, if we stick with those low bandwidth solutions. And Brown 27 has pointed out that in order to do this leveraging of technology, critical digital literacy provision needs to be anchored in real life settings and needs to take account of the wider socio-political context. And now, it is obvious that virtual exchange and thereby also critical virtual exchange they happen in real life settings. And critical virtual exchange in particular considers the wider socio-political context and is about reflexive use of technology. That's why I think it provides an ideal setting for this contextualization, taking account of the wider socio-political context for equitable education and social inclusion. And this is how it is all connected to agency, and critical virtual exchange is an ideal setting for promoting and for fostering critical consciousness and agency in the spirit of Paulo Freire's critical pedagogy. The ability to read the world critically and the ability to act in the world to change it, the ability to exercise critical agency. This is what critical virtual exchange stands for me. Now, I have two examples. Some of you might be familiar with this one. That was the first critical virtual exchange I ever mentored in the context of the EU Erasmus Plus funded Evolve project. That was evidence validated online learning through virtual exchange. At the time, I mentored 3 colleagues, one colleague from Sweden, one colleague from Poland, and one colleague from Argentina. It was a tridem. And they, in the first iteration of their collaboration, they had 55 students working in 10 teams. They did use English as a lingua franca. the exchange lasted between 6 and 8 weeks. Not all 3 cohorts were engaged for 8 weeks. That had got to do with the known challenges in terms of overlap or lack of overlap of academic calendars. Goes back to spring 2021. And the pedagogical aims of that exchange in terms of competence and skills development were the classic one, intercultural communication skills development, or intercultural communication competence development, but at the same time explicitly multimodal critical literacy skills development, which until then we had not found very often in virtual exchange endeavors. So this is what the instructions were to the participants, is how they pitched it to the participants. The project encourages you to develop your critical, creative, and digital skills by collaboratively studying the city as text. The focus is on critical multiliteracy and the promotion of intercultural communicative competence through first-hand experience of virtual exchange in cross-cultural groups. The task sequence involves popular, critical, and personal studies of place. You will explore the potentials of multimodal meaning making by comparing and discussing official visitor websites depicting your respective cities. You will focus on the particular stories and values that these websites promote. And then the students were asked to select and share examples of how cities figure in the news and in aesthetic texts, such as literature, poetry, or music. And the aim was to identify some controversial issues specifically linked to each of their cities. And this could be about segregation, poverty, crime, different kinds of prejudice, pollution. And then they created new websites to show a different face of their respective cities. They created websites within their cross-cultural groups. And they specifically aligned this reading the city, as they called it, this project at the time. They specifically aligned it with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 11, make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. And if you want to hear a few sound bites from learners who took part in this exchange, I can share the Evolve EU project site. One of the dissemination events, online dissemination events, was dedicated to that exchange, and there you can hear students talk about their experience during the Reading the City project. Now, in the next iteration, they slightly changed the focus. The questions at the core of the exchange were, how is Sustainable Development Goal 11 addressed in your city? So they brought this SDG alignment even more to the fore. Where are opportunities and challenges? And the VE task consisted in co-creating public sustainable campaigns in their cross-cultural teams. So it was about investigating the world, recognizing perspectives, negotiating ideas, and then taking action, designing a campaign. And there was, again, a multiliteracy dimension to it, because the learners were asked specifically to create multimodal campaigns. And they engaged with issues. You can see just the logos here I've shared with you. With sustainable clothing, there were quite a few initiatives around clean water supply in their cities. Beekeeping, there was one campaign in each of the cities on beekeeping. Another campaign for each of the 3 places was about how to make cities safer for women. Another one was focused on, I think 2 of the campaigns focused on transport, using alternatives to cars. maybe even to buses for cycling. And I think another one was on how we deal with waste in our cities. And on the left, you have just one sound bite from one of the students who participated in the second iteration of this exchange between the same three partners, this time even more specifically focused on UN SDG 11. Now, this was the task sequence, all fairly classic stuff. I'm sharing this with you just to make you see that it is not so difficult to transition from virtual exchange to critical virtual exchange and to critical global citizenship education. And we had the same kind of duration in the second iteration, again, between 6 to 8 weeks. Not everybody always participating from each three cohorts for the same reason, lack of sufficient overlap in academic schedules and calendars. Now here I have another example, the shared garden project. So I need to stop sharing this and I need to share something else. Nah, can't come out of this. Just a second. Okay. This is what I want to share. Just a moment. Can you see virtual vision, virtual exchange for social inclusion? Okay, good. One of the examples here is the shared garden project that had a physical space on the campus of Bordeaux University. And the students could only maintain that garden if they designed an ecological and sustainable watering system. And the students who came together were from different subject areas at different stages in their studies and lived and studied in different countries with different official languages. So there were undergraduates from applied physics and measurement engineering from Bordeaux University. And then there were a fourth-year electrical engineering undergraduates from the University of León in Spain. And that was actually quite a long project, yeah, and almost over 2 terms. What I want to show you is, or draw your attention to, is the project result. Students developed eco-friendly watering systems according to the 13th Sustainable Development Goal on climate action that were tested and were used in their shared garden. And the Bordeaux University students are now working with local allotment keepers. And these watering systems are actually now used in allotments, so outside the university. So here very clearly a local outreach initiative as part of the critical virtual exchange, which is with a result, with an impact, positive impact that still lives on. So let me stop sharing this. And let me go back to the PowerPoint. Thank you for your patience. So, yeah. What is in it for the stakeholders, you may ask? Here's a bit of an overview. I see the stakeholders, the students, of course, the educators, of course, the institutions and further education colleges, of course, but there is also a lot in it for the businesses, the NGOs, the charities that become involved in this. Yeah, there's engagement with new ideas and talent. students work with them to explore global solutions to local problems. So there is a global approach. They become indirectly involved in research and innovation and explore and new networking opportunities and collaboration opportunities with higher education and further education institutions. And let's just focus also on the students, because ultimately we are doing this all for them and with them. It is a new and different way to create portfolios, to improve employability skills, to engage with society and local issues, and to make a difference, and hopefully also a longer lasting impact. Okay, so what are the implications for research and practice if we continue on the critical virtual exchange path? I think I can claim with some confidence that it is an inclusive, sustainable, and also a scalable internationalization at home strategy, that it can and will instigate transformative change at individual, institutional, and hopefully also at policy level. But for me, personally, as a virtual exchange scholar, most important is the fact that it can create new legacies in internationalization at home based on conceptualization and understanding of research as living knowledge, praxis knowledge that connects lived experiences on the ground, the experiences of the students, of the educators, of the administrators, the decision makers involved in critical virtual exchange, but also the businesses, the charities, the NGOs involved. So the connection between these lived experiences with the body of global critical knowledge in international and intercultural education and transversal skills building. It will and definitely enriches virtual exchange and internationalization at home research, but also affects real change globally, but maybe first locally through the students' critical virtual exchange projects that focus on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and through this new model of employer and higher education collaborations. And it will hopefully enhance graduate employability, particularly employability of students from low socioeconomic backgrounds, through this international, intercultural, and transversal skills acquisition, but also through this work with local businesses, charities, NGOs, and other organizations. And with this, I say thank you. And here are my references. I will share the slide deck with Hope and Gabi. So do not worry, you'll get access to everything. Thank you.
Woo! All right, if everybody can unmute again and give Miriam a big woohoo and another round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank
Oh
you.
my goodness.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's very, very exciting. I feel like we now have a really, I think so. A lot of us are sort of hobbling along in many of these realms, and yet I don't think that people have figured out how to articulate what they're doing the way you are. So thank you so much. People, please throw questions in the chat or unmute and speak. Yeah, Betsy,
I want to acknowledge, let me just acknowledge that I'm sure that a lot of you already do a lot of this work, parts of it or all of it. But as you say, Hope, until someone comes along and frames it and can label it, and you can go out there and wave the flag for it, you know?
Yeah. Exactly.
And yeah, this is where I see my contribution to the field.
Absolutely. Ava, go ahead, and then Betsy, and Annette, I know you have something too.
I'm sorry, I was too lazy to write my question in the chat. I hope you forgive
Okay.
me, Miriam.
Oh, fine.
Really, always great to see you and listen to your ideas, Miriam. I saw that somebody who's also here, Penny Orton, from Durban University of Technology. We started and we're working together on an Erasmus project with several European and South African universities, ICUDU. And one of the challenges, we work on many of the things that you mentioned. So we're covering a lot of terrain. A question that I have for you, something I'm struggling with. Within these collaborations, these North-South collaborations, we're trying to create an equitable, safe space for students to equally contribute. But this is challenging because of cultural differences. And I'm not talking about the educational technology, because we are considering that, like, can everybody participate in an equitable way, at least with regarding the technology. But then in the dynamics, what happens, you know, when students are together, not necessarily when it's facilitated by the professors, but when they are on their own. What tips could you give to make that part of the collaboration more inclusive and equitable? Thank you.
I think it needs to be brought to the fore. I think we cannot just wait for it to happen and to fall into place. We know that now, nothing falls into place. Everything is an effort. Yeah, you have to, everything has to be forward organized and expectation managed. So what I usually say when people or colleagues ask me that question is, bring situations where things work well, but particularly situations where where exchanges and collaborative work in teams didn't work so well, to new exchanges in the warm-up and preparatory phase. So what I say, for example, if you have forum exchanges, you can anonymize them, yeah? Or if you have feedback from students, you can also, obviously, you can anonymize this. Or if there was a total breakdown and you can capture elements on the journey to this breakdown in whatever way, wherever it happened, if you have access to it. The problem is very often you don't, because they work in their own WhatsApp groups or not. Capture it, anonymize it, and share it in the initial phase of the next exchange and say, look, guys, what happened here? Yeah. Obviously, something didn't go quite well. What is it that we can do, that you can do, for that not to happen in your exchange, in your collaboration? And a very concrete piece of advice I always give is, let's say you have a group with 6 participants and you have an exchange that lasts 6 weeks. And this is an ideal scenario. I know it's just for the sake of the argument, to have change every week a different group champion, or yeah, and from the different side, A, B, and task them with summarizing in one paragraph what the group has achieved, yeah, what they think has worked well, what could maybe have worked better, and then everyone needs to come up with a strategy, with a solution, with an approach, with the next step that they can take to make sure that things work better in the following week. And in the following week, you have another group leader, and another group leader writes that summarizing paragraph. What have we achieved? What worked well? What do we need to do differently so that it works even better? It's always about putting the onus onto the students and making them think it through. Why does it work when it works is also important, by the way. Not only why does it not work when it goes pear-shaped, yeah? They also need to become aware of why it works well when there are no problems. I think that is just as important. Does that help, Eva?
Yeah, love that idea. Thank you.
Yeah. Kim, is Kim next? I don't know. I just see Kim next to me now.
Sure, and then we'll do somebody from the chat.
Okay,
Yeah.
I was worried there was someone who was supposed to go before me.
Okay,
Go for it.
Okay, so I think this project is amazing. I wanted to start with that. I absolutely love it, and I'm going through right now. Part of why I'm looking over here is I'm actually looking at the site that you linked to. So it's not that I'm not paying attention. So the question I have is that is about, and one of the things that I love about it is that you're working with people who come from a lower socioeconomic background. But I'm wondering if and how you address the sort of dynamic that might happen between students from a Western culture and students from a non-Western culture, and this dynamic of, saviorism that might come up. And, whether students are encouraged to look into that, or whether the instructors are aware of this potential dynamic. I was wondering if that's looked for at all or addressed at all.
It needs to be, and again, it is something that needs to be brought to the fore. We think of icebreakers and of warm-up activities as this fun stuff that we do to get into the zone. I think you always need to do at least 2, if not 3, for the price of 1. And you need to bring this need for awareness, self-awareness in particular, of who I am, what is my context, what has shaped what I know, or what I think I know, and who I am. This needs to be brought into these initial activities, so that we then don't run the risk to fall back into stereotyping and assuming assumptions. Very, very difficult online, and very quickly exacerbated and intensified online when there are then these awkward silences. The answer to all of these potential challenges that you have experienced is bring them to the fore, name the issues, and get the learners to engage with them. You cannot, I can only say it again, you cannot hope for the best. On the basis of experience, it is tricky, and we are not trained in that way as educators. So it is a new dimension to our pedagogical approaches to bring this critical incident work, as it is called in the literature, to the fore. But it's you can always use, or you can even make it up, what has happened in a previous exchange or in a similar situation as the starting point for a discussion. And then at the back of that, organically create in each team, the learners, they created a kind of what I call rules of engagement, rules of interaction, the participatory approaches that they want to take while they are working together. But the important thing is that you just trigger, you can only trigger the thought processes and the reflective engagement with it. But it happens on the level of awareness raising.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Yes.
So we do have a comment from the chat that came in a while ago, and then Maria, you can go. Actually, it was from Anu. How can we seek institutional support or support from administrators on CVE? That was from Anu, if you want to follow up on that.
Yeah, I mean, it is not just the internationalization offices or the internationalization officers that need to be involved. Across the board, all subject areas, particularly if you want to do sociopolitically relevant work, you need to liaise with your colleagues in political sciences, if they're not already involved anyway. So you need to show the work that can be done beyond the food, fashion, folklore, and festival level of virtual exchange. And this is where I also see the institutional benefit and the cross-curricular work.
Right. And it also is about connecting to initiatives that are already happening on your campus. And
I'm sure there are plenty.
yeah,
Yeah.
and to weave it in.
Actually, that can also be an outreach element. Okay, if we try to think outside of the box a little bit about outreach activity, it can also be outreach into other schools, into other subject areas, into other institutes within your university, where you can draw on knowledge and bring in work other students are doing in their field that might be relevant in your exchange because you have aligned with a certain United Nations SDG, for example.
Anu, do you want to follow up with anything?
I think that is a very important tip, you know, how we could, because I am not from languages, I'm from educational psychology, and I'm always thinking about ways in which virtual exchange can be incorporated. So particularly when you mention, Miriam, that it could be connected with the United Nations SDGs, I think that is a very, very powerful linkage.
Mm-hmm.
And I am trying to do this in the very, very initial stages. And I would, you know, keep following it up and see how it unfolds for me. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And a great presentation.
Thank you. The data, can I just say, I see something on data, GDPR or FERPA, big issue, big challenge in virtual exchange. And I think part of the solution lies in using spaces that are FERPA tight, that are GDPR, General Data Protection regulations, this side of the Atlantic, that are GDPR tight. So spaces that are password protected, closed spaces, are part of the answers. And then hosting materials on servers that are institutionally protected. I hope that addresses the issue, but that is a very, very important one. Particularly if the students also want to use this for their portfolio when they apply for jobs, etc. All of this needs to sit in a safe space. Not that the exchange is a safe space in itself, but the data and the materials and everything is homed in a safe space as well.
Maria, I think she has.
Yeah, well, we are, it is one, so I know that everyone wants to, has other things to do. But mine is not exactly a question, but it's more a comment and a follow-up, Miriam. I think we all go through the same process when we engage in COIL. We start with some excitement and try to collaborate with someone. And then not until we find our fit and our partner, we evolve into these other kinds of thinking. And I got into the SDGs in my COIL modules because I was doing COIL for several years, and I realized that I was missing critical thinking, critical reaction essence. And I said, how can I make my students really think through my prompts? Because I get some kind of different kinds of students. If it's an upper division course, maybe the prompts work better and they engage in critical thinking because they're more mature and the material and their the level of language is more mature. But I remember designing a module on the environment before I attached to any SDGs, and the students were just listing environmental problems without any example, just whatever they found in the internet just to do the homework. And then when I prompt them to give me solutions for some of the environmental problems they were finding that occurred in Colombia, the country that I COIL with, one student just told me, oh, they should put cameras all over the Amazon so they know who's cutting the trees. And when I got that answer, I said, I'm missing essence here. I need them to really think critically about economic systems, about inequity, about all this. How can I make them think critically if first they're not discussing it in their native language? What can they say in their native language that is still, or in their target language that is still is producing some critical thinking. So when I incorporated the SDGs and I frame it under the SDGs and the students knew what they were talking about and how to relate it, that helped. And also I realized one thing that you had been saying, that the collaborations are not in virtual exchange are not only with people abroad. Those collaborations need to happen locally.
Recording in progress.
Yes, and
In progress.
that
In
interdisciplinary
progress.
needs to happen
In
locally.
progress. In progress. In progress. In